picture this. You're standing in the middle of the desert at night.
Oh, yeah, the classic festival scene.
Right, exactly. You're surrounded by like tens of thousands of screaming music fans. The energy is just absolutely electric.
Oh, for sure.
It's that kind of deafening roar you only get at a really colossal global music festival. And then suddenly the performer on stage asks a single, simple question.
And everything changes.
Completely. In an instant, that deafening roar just totally vanishes. The entire stadium goes dead silent.
Which is wild to think about.
It really is. Just for a heartbeat, it's quiet. And then the silence breaks, but not just into cheers, it breaks into tears.
Yeah, people were just bawling.
Exactly. We are talking about a collective, totally spontaneous wave of profound emotion with people all around you literally bursting into tears.
It's such a striking image.
It really is. So welcome to the deep dive. Today we are exploring Justin Bieber's highly talked about 2026 Coachella set.
And it is definitely worth talking about.
100%. But I want to be clear, we aren't here to review the lighting or critique the vocals.
Right, plenty of other places for that.
Yeah, exactly. The mission of this deep dive today is to figure out the exact psychological machinery that turned a 90-minute pop show into an actual generational time machine.
Which is a tall order for a pop concert.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this. Because I want you, the listener, to imagine for a second what it is like to grow up alongside a global pop star.
It's a very specific kind of parasocial relationship.
It really is. Like to have your own awkward phases, your own heartbreaks, your own coming-of-age milestones happening at the exact same time as theirs.
Yeah, your timelines are just totally synced up.
Right. So what would it actually feel like to stand in that desert and suddenly be confronted with both your past and theirs simultaneously?
It's such a striking image to start with. I mean, because we usually associate those enormous festival crowds with pure adrenaline.
Right.
Not like sudden vulnerable introspection.
No, not at all. Usually it's just jumping up and down.
Exactly. So to pivot from a frenzy to dead silent and then into collective weeping, well, that requires a very specific kind of psychological trigger.
So what is that trigger? Where does it start?
Well, to understand that emotional climax, we first have to look at the physical reality of the stage itself. The setup of this 2026 performance was remarkably different from the highly produced pop spectacles we typically expect.
Oh, especially from him.
Right. Especially for an artist of his caliber.
It was a staggering shift in style, honestly. Like, if you think back to his tours from a decade ago, it was all flying harnesses. And
oh, yeah. Dozens of backup dancers.
Dozens. Colossal set pieces, pyrotechnics going off every 3 minutes. But when you look at the footage from this 90-minute set at Coachella, it is incredibly stripped down.
He really is.
There wasn't a lot of fancy production at all. It was basically like a magician just removing all the smoke and mirrors, mostly just him, a microphone, and a laptop.
And that choice is incredibly deliberate. I mean, when you are headlining Coachella, the budget is practically limitless. You could do literally whatever you want.
Right. You can build a spaceship on stage if you want to. So choosing not to do that is a profound statement. It completely shifts the audience's expectations.
Okay, I have to stop you there, though.
Sure, go ahead.
Is it actually a profound statement, or, is it just easier?
How do you mean?
Well, a lot of artists get older, they get tired of the grueling choreography, and they just want to stand at a mic stand. Couldn't we just be looking at a guy who didn't want to rehearse for 6 months?
It's a fair question, I get that. But if you look at the execution, the minimalism wasn't a shortcut. It was a magnifying glass.
Magnifying glass.
Yeah. When you strip away the dancers and the fireworks, you cannot hide behind anything. It demands an entirely different level of vulnerability.
Oh, I see. Because there's no distraction.
Exactly. You are relying solely on your voice, your presence, and your connection with the audience. What's fascinating here is how, by taking away all that visual noise, he essentially shrunk a 100,000-person festival desert down to the size of a living room. Wow, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, he signaled to the audience right from the first note, basically saying, this is not a spectacle. This is an intimate connection.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. The silence of the stage design created the space for a much louder emotional connection.
Precisely.
And it really showed in his performance. Like, he wasn't rushing through anything. He took his time. His voice sounded remarkably strong, and he just looked entirely in control.
Which is a stark contrast, right?
Oh, definitely. A stark contrast to the frantic, hyperkinetic young pop star those fans used to know. It was a whole new level of stage presence.
And what's fascinating here is the psychological contrast this creates for the audience.
Right.
You have this mature, confident, grounded artist standing before them, but the environment is so intimate that it completely lowers the audience's defenses.
Because they aren't overwhelmed by the visuals?
Exactly.
Mhm.
When you are watching a massive spectacle, your brain is just in observation mode. But when you are in an intimate setting, your brain switches to participation mode.
Which perfectly set the stage for what happened next.
The big moment.
Yeah, the viral moment. Because of that participation mode, he created the space for a single, unscripted moment of crowd interaction that completely changed the entire vibe of the festival.
It really was the turning point of the show.
Midway through this incredibly raw set, he suddenly stops. He looks out at the ocean of people and he asks them, "How far back do you go?"
And there is that silence we talked about at the beginning.
Right. The whole stadium went completely silent for a second and then just erupted into cheers.
And tears.
Yeah. People in the comment sections of these viral clips were reporting that they literally started bawling over this specific interaction.
It hit a very specific nerve.
But again, I want to push back on this a little bit.
Okay, play devil's advocate.
Because artists talk to the crowd all the time. They pander. Every night in every city, some lead singer yells, "Who's been here since day one?"
Right, or where are my original fans at?
Exactly. So are we over-intellectualizing this one sentence? How far back do you go? It triggers such an absolute emotional avalanche compared to a standard concert cliche.
Well, we aren't over-intellectualizing it because the phrasing fundamentally changes the center of gravity of the performance.
How so?
Let's look at the syntax of the cliche you just mentioned. Who's been here since day one? The subject of that sentence, at its core, is the artist.
Oh, right, because day one means their day one.
Exactly. Day one implies the beginning of their career, their journey, their album cycle. It asks the fan to validate the artist's ego. It demands that the audience prove their loyalty to the performer.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it really makes a fan just a supporting character in the artist's movie.
Precisely. But look at the syntax of how far back do you go. It shifts the focus entirely from the artist's ego to the fan's own life journeys.
It turns it back on them.
Yes, it forces the audience inward. It instantly asks them to search their own mental filing cabinets and remember exactly where they were, who they were with, and how old they were when they first became fans.
So it frames the concert not as a one-way performance, but as a shared timeline.
Exactly. It completely changes the dynamic.
It's basically saying, we grew up together. How much of my timeline overlaps with your timeline?
Yes. And you really have to consider the concept of parasocial relationships here.
Right.
For an artist who has been in the public eye since he was a young teenager, asking a crowd of people in their late 20s and 30s, how far back do you go, is basically asking, do you remember being 13?
Oh, man, that is powerful.
It is a psychological masterstroke because it validates the fan's own coming-of-age experience. It acknowledges that his music was just the soundtrack to their actual lives.
That shift from look at me to look at us is so powerful, and I really want to highlight how this performance connected with the fans' youth memories.
It was incredibly intentional.
Yeah, because the psychological framing wasn't just spoken. He didn't just ask the question and, move on to the next track. He was about to visually and musically demonstrate this shared timeline right there on stage.
The music itself became the vehicle for that time travel.
Let's get into the set list then, because the pivot happens right around the older hits. He drops Baby, he plays That Should Be Me.
Classic triggers for that nostalgia.
Right. But the absolute peak of the night, the moment that basically broke the internet, was when he played his 2012 track, Beauty and a Beat.
Oh, yeah. The crowd reaction there was undeniable.
When you watch the footage, the second the intro to that song starts, the crowd goes absolutely feral. But it wasn't just the audio driving them crazy. You have to look at what's happening on the screens behind him, too.
Because it certainly wasn't an accident.
Not at all. Here's where it gets really interesting. As he is singing these older tracks, this enormous screen behind him lights up, and it starts playing clips of his younger self.
The teenager with the famous swoop haircut.
Yes, the kid who started out playing guitar on YouTube. But it wasn't just a slideshow. The way it was staged, it looked like a cinematic flashback happening in real time.
It was so well done.
It really looked as though the mature 2026 artist was physically turning around and singing to his past. He was having a conversation with his younger self right in front of tens of thousands of people.
And this visual storytelling is a physical manifestation of a psychological concept called autobiographical memory.
Break that down for us, because how does autobiographical memory play into that specific visual?
Well, when you see a mature artist looking back at a video of their teenage self, your brain doesn't just process the image of the artist. It forces a dual processing state.
Meaning you process two things at once.
Exactly. You cannot help but project your own teenage self onto that screen. Autobiographical memory relies heavily on sensory cues to retrieve past experiences, and music is one of the most potent triggers we have.
That makes total sense.
So when the fans see 16-year-old Justin, their brains simultaneously pull up the memory of their 16-year-old selves. This raises an important question about why an old song suddenly hits different. It's because if the artist is having a conversation with who they used to be, the fan is suddenly having a conversation with who they used to be.
It reminds me of the concept of emotional scent.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
You know, like when you walk into your old elementary school or you smell a very specific brand of cheap body spray and you are instantly transported back to a middle school hallway.
Oh yeah, Axe body spray will do that to you.
Exactly. You don't just remember it. Your body actually feels 12 years old again for a split second. The song essentially becomes a mirror.
That is a perfect analogy. The temporal layering happening in that moment is profound. The audience isn't just cheering for the artist's growth, they are literally weeping for their own lost youth.
They remember blasting that exact song in their childhood bedroom.
Exactly. Maybe they were navigating their first crush or studying for high school exams. They are actively layering their own coming-of-age experiences over the artist's visual retrospective.
It's like a shared acknowledgement of survival.
It really is. They're mourning the past and celebrating their arrival into adulthood at the exact same time.
We have the data to prove that this wasn't just a fleeting, ethereal feeling in the desert. This temporal layering had a very real, tangible impact.
Numbers don't lie.
They really don't. After this set, Beauty and a Beat, a song that came out well over a decade ago, went completely viral all over again.
It was everywhere.
It hit #1 on Apple Music. It racked up millions of new streams on Spotify practically overnight. That is the literal definition of striking a cultural nerve.
It is a phenomenal metric.
Yeah.
It proves that the emotional resonance of that staging was so potent that people needed to take that feeling home with them.
They couldn't just leave it in the desert.
Exactly. They needed to keep listening to capture that specific nostalgia again, to keep holding on to that emotional scent, as you called it.
Which brings us to how the public and the media are framing this whole event.
The overarching narrative.
Right. The consensus coming out of this weekend was universally labeling this performance a big comeback.
Yeah, that word was thrown around a lot.
It's being heralded as the definitive beginning of a new chapter, and fans are immediately clamoring for a world tour. But I have to say, the word comeback feels a bit off to me.
Why is that?
Well, comeback usually implies someone fell off, lost their talent, or vanished entirely, and now they're trying to claw their way back to relevance.
No. Right, like they need redemption.
Exactly. But when you synthesize everything we've just discussed, so what does this all mean? That's not what this was.
No, not at all.
This wasn't a promotional push for a new album. It wasn't a desperate grab for attention. The feeling in that crowd, as described by the sources, was that this was a love letter to the fans. It wasn't really a concert. It was a reunion.
There's a crucial distinction. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it speaks volumes about the typical trajectory of child stars, which is usually fraught with a lot of friction.
What do you mean by friction?
Think about the arc of almost every teen idol in modern music history. Artists who achieve staggering fame young often spend their early adult careers desperately trying to destroy their teenage image.
Oh, for sure. The whole rebellion phase.
Exactly. They refuse to play their early hits. They change their sound drastically. They distance themselves from the cringe of their youth because they want to prove they are serious, mature artists.
They treat their past as something to be ashamed of.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, we see it constantly. They actively resent the very songs that made them famous, which, by extension, sometimes feels like they resent the fans who loved those songs.
Right, it creates a real disconnect. But here, he neutralized that friction entirely.
He didn't run away from his past?
No, he brought that teenage self onto the stage with him. He projected him onto a 50-foot screen. And by doing that, by standing there as a grounded adult and smiling at his younger self, he validated the fans who stayed with him the entire time.
He basically said, the music you loved when you were 13 was valid then, and it is valid now. We don't have to be embarrassed about who we were.
Precisely. By combining that mature stage presence with a direct acknowledgement of the passage of time, he orchestrated a massive celebration of youth.
It allowed the audience to embrace their own inner child without any irony or shame.
They got to experience the pure, unadulterated joy of their teenage years. But this time, they got to experience it as mature adults standing together.
It is a profoundly healing act.
It takes a lot of vulnerability to stand on a stage with just a laptop and a microphone and say, let's look at who we used to be together.
It completely explains why a desert festival suddenly turned into a stadium full of tears. It wasn't just a performance, it was catharsis.
Catharsis on a generational scale.
Absolutely. It really reframes how we think about the relationship between pop music and aging. We often dismiss pop music as disposable, but moments like this prove that it acts as the emotional scaffolding for our entire lives.
And that is the true magic of what happened at Coachella. It wasn't about the spectacle of the present. It was about honoring the journey of the past.
Well said. So, that wraps up our deep dive for today. Thank you for joining us as we explored how a simple microphone, a bare stage, and one incredibly poignant question transformed a music festival into a shared time machine.
It really allowed a generation to collectively embrace their youth.
It did. But before we go, I know you had one last thing to share.
Yeah, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder on your own, building on this whole theme of musical nostalgia.
Let's hear it.
When we are teenagers, we often use pop music to escape our childhoods, right? To feel older, to imagine a future where we are finally free.
Oh, absolutely.
But isn't it fascinating that as adults, those exact same songs become the only tools we have to successfully travel back to our youth?
Wow.
So the next time you hear a song from your teenage years, ask yourself, are you listening to the artist? Or are you just listening to an echo of who you used to be?
Man, what a question to end on. Thank you so much for exploring this with us.
It's been a real pleasure. Until next time.